Hi folks, my name is Ben and this week we are going to learn how to make a comic book. Now, you might not know this, but a lot of work goes into making every comic book, and we're going to try to cover each and every aspect of that this week. That includes script, character design, page layouts, penciling, inking, coloring, and lettering. Now, that's a lot of work, so let's get started. Right. So, the first part of making a comic might seem like an easy thing, but we want to mention it anyway, and that is coming up with an idea for your story. Now, a comic can have any kind of story you want. You're not constrained by budget, like in a movie, or settings, anything like that. It is whatever you want it to be, because you get to draw it. So, just come up with a story that you want to tell. It can be something as simple as how your day went, or something as complex as Spider Man and Batman teaming up to defeat the Joker. It can be anything you want. Now, once you have that idea, next comes the script. Now, the script does take a little bit of time, and it's not the most exciting part of the comic, but writing your script ahead of time does really, really help later down the line. Now, we're going to look at a sample script here just to show you one way that you can write your script. Now, on this sample script, I've made a few letters on the page that are going to help you kind of define what you need to put on a script page. Again, this is not the only way to write a script. You write a script that makes sense to you, but this sample script shows you a couple different things that you're going to want to make sure you include. Now, letter A is right next to the word 1. That 1 is the page that we are looking at. You're going to want to make sure that you write down the page you're looking at. Most comics run 20 to 22 pages. We'll get into why the comics always run even numbers shortly, but you want to try to make sure that your comics run an even number of pages. So 8, 10, 12, 20, 40, it's up to you. Now, B says panel 1 and then gives a description of panel 1. You're going to want to give a description for each panel or each section of a page so that you know what you're going to be drawing inside that panel. Section C, or letter C rather, is who or what is speaking in the scene. In this particular script, these are pages from a diary. You'll see that there's a little note about the diary having a handwritten style. So that is what C is, who is talking in this particular case. D, E, and F are all examples of text that is being put on the page. Now, we're going to get to lettering at the very end, but D, E, and F are all examples of the amount of lettering inside each panel. Finally, G is the space in between the end of what you've written and the next page. Notice that we don't go right on to page 2. This script, especially when you're typing, it's easier to do this, has one page of comic on one page of script. All right. So those are the different parts of the script. Now, again, I know I've said it before, but I'll say it again. You write the script that makes sense to you. But if you don't write a script beforehand, you don't know what you're going to be putting in each panel and each page, and that's going to make it difficult. So make sure that you write your script first, and then you move on to the next step. Okay, so now we have our script ready to go. Now before we start drawing the actual comic, we want to make sure that we're comfortable drawing the characters that are going to be in the story. Now you might have one character in your story, 2, 4, 20, it's up to you. But before you start drawing your comic, you want to make sure that you can draw your characters in various poses. They're not always just going to be standing still. They're going to be in action poses probably, even if it's something simple like walking down the street. So to do that, we want to make sure that we, for each character, do a character design sheet. Now, just like with the script, there's no right or wrong way to do this, but there are a lot of different variations. The goal in general is to create a sheet that shows what your character looks like from the front, the back, the side, maybe what they look like when they're going through different feelings, happy, sad, angry. You want to do this, and it doesn't have to be super detailed, but you might want to include color, just so you know what each character looks like. fully colored. It doesn't necessarily have to have color though. Also, you could do something that's just a bunch of different poses of your character to see how your character moves. Are they very flexible? Are they characters that dance a lot? Are they characters that just walk around? Get used to drawing your character in different poses. That's what the character design sheet's for. Now, on the screen are a couple of examples that I've included here. This first one is a very straightforward character design sheet. Front, back, side, 3/4 angle, that's the one that's a little tilted, and then a couple of faces that show you what that character feels like when he's experiencing different emotions. The next one, with the panda here, has a bunch of different poses of the same character, but just going through different things that he might go through in your script. He might be dancing, he might be walking, he might be thinking. Just a nice way to practice. Also, I've included this blank character sheet as well. Now, this blank character sheet is very formalized. You don't have to make anything nearly so formal, but if you prefer it that way, this is a great way to make sure that you are including a little bit of everything on your character sheets. These character sheets are a huge advantage before you start working on the book itself. These character sheets allow you to really feel comfortable when you're drawing any of the characters in your script. Alright guys, now one other thing that I should mention is if you're not totally comfortable drawing your character just yet, that's okay. There's plenty of time to practice. That's the only way we're going to get better. Plenty of artists have a hard time drawing certain things, and so it never hurts to practice a little more drawing a certain expression that maybe you don't feel comfortable with, or a certain thing that maybe you don't feel comfortable with. I know plenty of artists that don't like drawing things like hands, or other artists that don't like drawing horses, but they practice those things so that they get really good. Now, I would not be able to tell you this without giving you a few great examples of ways that we can practice, specifically with characters. Now, as we're working on our character sheets, we're going to get used to drawing certain characters, but to practice getting them in poses, there's a couple different things that we want to do. First, we can focus on all the different parts of facial features that help make up a face. When you think about a happy face, you think of a smile. But what are the eyes doing in a smile? What does the nose do? What do the ears do? When you smile, everything on the face moves. So it's good to practice drawing all those things. As an example here, I'm going to show you a few different practices that you can do if you're not feeling 100% ready to start working on your characters. First, we can practice with just the eyes. Now, here are a couple different examples of what's going on with just eyes. Some of the eyes look happy, surprised, sad, confused. Practice drawing some eyes. It's going to help quite a bit. Next up, we're going to do noses. Again, think about how much the nose moves no matter what your mouth is doing. It's right there in the middle of your face, and it's kind of surprising how many times people forget how important the nose is to what's going on in the rest of the face. So take some time, practice some noses. And of course, we've got the mouth. The mouth is very filled with expression. Are the teeth showing? Are the teeth hidden? What's going on? Again, take a look at these examples. Who's angry? Who's sad? Who's upset? Who's happy? Now, those are all great examples of practicing with the face. And again, you're going to be drawing a lot of faces, so it's a great place to start. But the other thing that you might want to practice while you're still practicing your shapes is drawing a body. Now, the body is drawn a bunch of different ways depending on your particular drawing style. But the body should be in motion. Remember, we're telling a story that is panel to panel, page to page. These are freeze frames of specific moments. We're not doing a movie. So we want to make sure that every panel, the character isn't just frozen in place. The character is moving into the next panel. So this is a snapshot in time. It's this, not this, to this. We want to make sure that the character feels like they're in motion. Now to do that, I've got a couple things that I want to show you. First of all, when you're starting with a character, you want to start with a real, basic, easy to do stick figure. Everybody can draw a stick figure. This helps get the general idea of motion. Just easy, easy, quick. So, we've got this quick, easy stick figure. But look at all the different motions that it can have. It can be happy, it could be dancing, it could be sad, it could be jumping, it could be throwing something. Now, once we've got the stick figure, we want to add a little more to it. This next diagram shows you a couple of different things that you can add. We're going to start by adding in rough shapes, circles, spheres, rectangles, cubes. We're going to add in those basic shapes, and those are going to kind of rough out the body. It doesn't need to look specific, it doesn't need to look great. These are just rough shapes. Now, once we've got the shapes in place, and we've kind of got an idea of what the character is going to be doing, next thing that we're going to do is to start adding a little more detail. You can see here on the third diagram that the character has added in a lot of dimension. Now, you don't have to do all this detail if you're just doing practice sketches, but it helps you warm up, helps you get ready. So these are great exercises to help you feel more comfortable drawing your character or any character in motion. Any warming up or practice that you want to do before you start drawing is always a good idea. Make sure that you feel comfortable with drawing whatever you're going to draw before you put it in your book, not after. That'll save you a lot of time erasing once you're working on the book itself. Right. We have finished our character designs and our script. The next step for us to work on is page layouts. Now, page layouts help determine how the story flows, not only from page to page, but how the story is told throughout the page. Now, I'm going to put up an example here. This example shows you a standard 6-panel page. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, notice in this next page how the action is supposed to flow from top to bottom, left to right. It makes a zigzag pattern like a lightning bolt. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, keep that in mind when you're making your layouts. I'm going to show you one more page here, and that page is a bunch of different layouts. Now, these layouts, you don't have to use all of them, but these are some sample layouts for you if you're trying to think about how you would like to lay out each page of your book. Now, you might be asking yourself, how am I supposed to figure out what kind of layout I'm using? Now, you might be asking yourself, how am I supposed to choose a layout? What's going on? Well, you already did the bulk of this work when you wrote your script. Remember, each script page has how many panels go into that page. Now, what you're going to put on each panel, we're going to get to in just a second. But you can start by figuring out how many panels you need to have in a page. And if you've got a lot of words in one panel, you're going to want to make sure that that panel is bigger. If you don't have a lot of words in a panel, you can make sure that panel is a little bit smaller. If you have a big action scene with a lot going on, make that panel bigger. If you just have a very close-up look of somebody, thinking hard, that can be a smaller panel. It really depends on what's going on in each panel to whether or not it should be a big or a small panel. Now, what you're going to want to do is come up with a layout design for each of the pages in your book. You don't need to write that on anything fancy. You can just take a piece of paper and do one for every page in your comic, all on the same piece of paper. It's just something for you to refer back to, just like the script. It's going to make things a lot smoother later on. Okay, so we finished panel layouts, and we are just about ready to get started with the drawing of our book. Now, when I'm working on a book at home, what I like to do is I take a bunch of pieces of paper, just white paper. You can use it, same paper you use at the printer. And you take them and you put them together and you fold them in half, hamburger style. And now you've got a nice digest-sized book. It's a little bit smaller than your traditional comic book, but that's nice because you have to draw a little bit less too. One other thing that I've found that really helps is if I number each and every one of the pages, just a tiny little number in pencil, so that I remember which page I'm drawing on. Because as I fold it in half here, it might get a little tricky, because this is 1, this is 2, right? We're not all just drawing everything on one piece of paper. 1, 2, flip to the next page, 3, 4, for however many pages you're going to do. Now, when you think of it that way, each one page of printer paper is 1, 2, 3, 4 pages. So, earlier I had mentioned that comic creators like to do even numbers of pages. For this particular method, you probably want to do something that is divisible by 4. So, a 4-page book, an 8-page book, a 16-page book, a 20-page book, so on and so forth. Now, as you start drawing, the first thing that you want to do is to put in place those panels that you laid out in the last step. For me, I always like to make sure I use a ruler when I'm putting those in because I want to make sure that everything is nice and even. If you want something that's a little more rough, you can use no ruler. That's totally fine. Or if you just have if you're super good at drawing straight lines, you go ahead and draw it without a ruler. Now, once you have those panels in place on your pages, the next step comes into play. Okay, so now we've got our panels on our pages and we are ready to start drawing the action. Now, if you feel like you know exactly what you want to draw and exactly how it's supposed to look, you can go ahead and skip this next part. But for me, I find it very helpful if I do a rough layout of what's going to be drawn. Now, let me show you an example. Here is a Western comic, and this is what's going to be happening on the page. It doesn't look like much, but when I am looking at this, I can see that all of my characters fit on the panels just like it said in the script, and I know that there's space enough for the words that I'm going to put in later in the dialogue. So doing this allows me to make sure that everything is going to look the way I want. When you're doing this, if you are doing this, you're going to want to make sure you do this in very light pencil. Very light pencil. That way you can erase it and it won't show up later. Now, once you've got that done, you are going to move on to the actual pencil phase. The pencil phase, again, is called pencil phase because you're going to use a pencil, but this is where you really start putting in the more intricate line work. This is where you're going to start putting in details. This is where you're going to start putting in like expressions on your characters' faces or details in the background. This is where a lot of time gets spent on making a comic. You guys remember that Western page that I showed you the rough outline of? Well, here's what it looks like when it's penciled. That's pretty neat, right? Now, here's another page that is just pencils. This is from a Transformers comic. Notice that there is a lot of detail there, but it doesn't look quite finished. We're going to get to the finishing step in just a second. Okay. So, we are done penciling our book, which probably took a little while, but it's starting to take shape. We know what's on each page. We know what's in each panel, and now it's finally in the book. Now, the next step is something called inking. Inking is a wonderful process, and it helps add dimension to what you've drawn. It's not just a light sketch anymore. Now it's really starting to take shape. Inking helps us add depth and dimension and detail to the drawings we already had. You guys remember that Transformers piece that I showed you just a few seconds ago? The penciled one? Well, here is the inked version. Notice how much more detail there is. Also, there's a lot of black space that was just tiny X's in the pencil phase that actually gets turned into black space here in the inking phase. Now, what you're going to want to do with your drawings is to use a pen. You can use anything from a ballpoint pen to something a little heavier like a marker if it's a big piece of space, but you're going to go in there and take all the shadow areas, all the darkened areas, even just going over lines. It's kind of like tracing, but with a little extra. Think of it as tracing plus. And this will really help make your comic stand out. So you're going to go back through and ink each and every panel on each and every page. Now, if you have any changes that you want to make to anything, Do it before the inking process. You can erase a pencil, you can't erase a pen. So go ahead, make those changes, and then get started with the inking. Guys, we are almost there. Okay guys, now that we're done with inking, we are almost finished. Now, the next thing that we want to do is actually add the lettering to our book, the words. So when you wrote out your script, you wrote what the dialogue was or what the words were that your characters were going to say. This is the part where we're going to add those in. Now, you're going to add them as straight as possible into the correct panels. You're also going to circle those with a circular shape. We call that a word balloon. At the end of the word balloon, there's going to be a little thing called a tail, which goes from the word balloon to the character's mouth that is saying those words. Here is a picture of an old X-Men comic. Notice that the word balloons have the tails going to the characters who are saying the proper dialogue. Now, in the roughing phase, we wanted to make sure that we left enough space for our text, and now that we are here, we're probably glad that we did that. What I like to do if I'm not sure about how much text I have and how much can fit on a page is to pencil in, just like what I did with the actual drawings, pencil in the letters, and then ink them in pen. That way, I make sure everything fits before I finalize anything. This is a quick step, but it's very important because this helps tell us what's going on from page to page. Also, just a quick note, if you have a choice, you want to try to get the text balloon above a character's head, not below. One other thing, if we go back to that X-Men page that I showed you, notice that there is a caption or something that nobody is saying, but that the comic book reader needs to read at the top of that first panel. This caption is in a rectangle, not a circle. That's how the reader knows that it's something that they need to hear, but it's more like the narrator telling them that instead of a character. Lettering is pretty straightforward, but it does take a little bit of time if you want to make sure that you get the letters nice and straight. I will usually use a ruler just to make sure that I am writing on a level line. Go ahead and do yours now, and then we'll finish up. All right, guys, the last step that we are going to add in is something called coloring, where we add, you might have guessed it, color to our comic book. Color on a comic book adds a whole lot. It can tell you all sorts of things, like is it daytime or nighttime? Is it inside or outside? What color are the clothes that your character is wearing? Color adds a whole new dimension to what is on the page. Now, professional comics, they are often colored digitally, but since we're probably not going to be able to get into that, we can just rely on markers, crayons, or colored pencils. Whatever you feel the most comfortable with, you can use. Heck, if you like watercolor, go ahead and use that. Although, if you're just using printer paper, watercolor will probably bleed through your pages, so maybe don't. Anyway, as an example, let me show you this Spider-Man piece. Now, this Spider-Man piece has been inked. As you can see, there's the heavy black lines. It's a beautiful piece, but it's missing a little something. Now, let's take a look at what it looks like when it's been colored. Notice that we can see what angle the sun is coming in from by seeing where the darker areas are with more shadow, or the lighter areas where the sun is hitting Spider-Man more directly. Now, even though we aren't coloring digitally like that Spider-Man piece, there's still plenty you can do with your crayons, your markers, or your colored pencils. By pressing down hard with your colored pencil, your crayon, your marker, you can create a darker, richer color for use in a place where your character might be in the shade or a shadow. You can also do the opposite. Press down very lightly with your colored pencil or your crayon and create a lighter version of that color for where the character is in bright light. You can also, just as a little bit of a cheat, use no color at all in the areas that are really brightly lit. Pure white, like the sun is glinting off them. That's a little hint. Anyway, once you finish coloring, your book is now complete. Comic books are a wonderful medium. They are able to combine writing, they're able to combine drawing, lettering, coloring. They've got all that put together and they make it into one big, fun to read package. Now, you have all the tools that you need to go and make your own comic as many times as you want. Have fun, keep practicing, and I can't wait to see what you come up with. Till next time, have a great day, guys.